The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the empty darkness between star systems. It was bigger than most moons, with gleaming metal walls that stretched for miles in every direction. Inside its huge chambers, representatives from 47 different alien species had gathered for another quarterly meeting of the Galactic Confluence. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the main corridor, her simple black uniform standing out among the colorful robes and strange body types around her. Tall blue beings with crystal skin chatted with insect-like creatures that had 6 arms. Energy beings floated in glass containers while talking to rock-like aliens covered in glowing moss. Elena was the only human in sight. She entered the Great Assembly Hall, a vast circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Hundreds of seats were arranged in rings with the most important species sitting close to the center. Elena made her way to the very back corner, where a small table with 3 chairs waited for her. It was the same spot humans had been given for the past 20 years. The Zephyrian High Commander stood at the center podium. His body looked like it was made of living crystal, catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like music. "Today we discuss territorial claims and trade rights," he announced. "Several species have requested permission to establish outposts in valuable systems." Elena listened as one species, after another, presented their requests. The Vorthons wanted mining rights on 3 asteroid belts. The Kelrani asked for permission to build research stations near a pulsar. Each request was discussed seriously, and most were approved quickly. Finally, Elena's name was called. She stood and walked to the small speaking area reserved for minor species. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steady. "The United Earth government requests permission to establish a small research outpost in the Kepler 442 system," she said. "We want to study the planets there and look for signs of ancient life." The hall went completely silent for 3 seconds, then someone started laughing. It began with a few quiet chuckles from the Draconian delegation. Then the Vorthons joined in, their insect-like clicking sounds mixing with deeper rumbles from the rock people. Soon the entire hall was filled with laughter, whistles, screeches, and whatever passed for amusement among the various alien species. The Zephyrian High Commander held up one crystal hand for silence. When the laughter died down, he spoke with barely hidden amusement. "The representatives from Earth believe they should be given territorial rights," he said, his musical voice carrying a mocking tone. "These hairless apes think they can contribute something meaningful to galactic civilization." More laughter erupted. Elena's face burned with embarrassment, but she kept her expression calm. A tall Vorthon delegate stood up. Her insect body was covered in shiny green plates, and her 6 arms gestured wildly as she spoke. "What exactly would humans bring to this research?" she asked. "Your species has not even mastered faster than light travel. You still use primitive chemical rockets that barely get you to your own moon. Their most advanced ships take months to travel between planets in their own system," added another voice from the crowd. "They speak of exploring the galaxy when they cannot even leave their home star." Elena tried to respond, but her voice was drowned out by more laughter and jeering comments. "Humans are too young," called out a Kelrani representative, his bird-like head bobbing with each word. "Their civilization is only a few thousand years old. We have been traveling between stars since before their species learned to make fire." "They are too aggressive," added a floating energy being. "Look at their history. They fight wars over patches of dirt on their single planet. Imagine the chaos if they had access to real technology. Too primitive, too violent, too young," the Zephyrian High Commander summarized. "Earth has nothing to offer the galaxy. Their request shows dangerous overconfidence." Elena finally managed to make herself heard. "We may be young, but we learn quickly. Give us a chance to prove ourselves." This brought fresh waves of laughter. "Prove yourselves?" The Vorthon delegates' mandibles clicked in amusement. "You cannot even travel to other star systems. What could you possibly discover that we have not already found?" A massive creature that looked like a walking mountain spoke up. Its voice rumbled like an earthquake. Young species must learn their place. The galaxy is not a playground for children. Elena felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced it down. Getting emotional would only make things worse. Every species was young once, she said carefully. The Confluence has always said it welcomes new members who show promise. Promise? The High Commander's crystal face somehow managed to look amused. What promise have humans shown? You wage war constantly. Your technology is centuries behind even our newest members. You have contributed nothing to galactic knowledge or peace. The energy being in its glass container pulsed with different colors. The human request is not just denied, it is presumptuous. They seek rights they have not earned in a system they could not even reach. Elena saw nods and gestures of agreement throughout the hall. Even the species that usually stayed neutral were supporting the rejection. I call for a formal vote, the High Commander announced. All in favor of denying the human request and issuing a formal censure for presumptuous overreach? Hands, claws, tentacles, and various other appendages rose throughout the hall. Elena counted quickly. Every single species voted against humanity. The motion passes unanimously, the High Commander declared. The human request is denied. Earth is formally censured for making requests beyond their station. Perhaps in a few centuries, when they have developed actual spaceflight capabilities, they may try again. The session ended with more laughter and casual insults. Representatives filed out of the hall, many stopping to make jokes about human arrogance. Elena sat alone at her small table, watching the aliens leave. As the hall emptied, an Etherian representative floated over to her. Unlike the energy being that had spoken earlier, this one moved silently and seemed almost transparent. Its voice whispered directly into her mind. Your species shows interesting potential, it said softly. Most young races give up after such rejection. Humans seem different. Elena looked up at the glowing form. Different how? Most species show the Confluence exactly what they are from the beginning. Everything is visible, predictable. But humans... The Etherian paused. Humans keep secrets. The Confluence sees only the surface of your civilization. Perhaps that is wisdom. Before Elena could ask what that meant, the Etherian faded away like morning mist. Elena gathered her papers and stood up slowly. Around her, the empty hall felt enormous and cold. She had known the request would probably be rejected, but the level of mockery had been worse than expected. As she walked back through the corridors toward the human quarters, she thought about the Etherian's words, secrets. The Confluence did not know everything about humanity. In fact, they knew almost nothing about what humans were really capable of. Elena smiled slightly. Let them laugh. Let them think humans were primitive and harmless. The truth would come out eventually, but not today. Today, she would file her report, accept the rejection gracefully, and let the galaxy continue believing that Earth was just another young species reaching too far too fast. The aliens had no idea how wrong they were, and Elena intended to keep it that way, at least for now. Dr. Sarah Chen pulled her thick coat tighter as the Antarctic wind howled across the ice. The research station looked tiny against the endless white landscape, just a few metal buildings connected by covered walkways. She had been working here for 8 months, leading a team that officially did not exist. The ice-penetrating radar had found something impossible 3 kilometers down. The readings showed geometric shapes too perfect to be natural, buried under millions of years of ice. Getting permission to dig had taken 6 months and required clearance from the highest levels of government. Sarah checked her watch. The morning briefing would start soon. She walked back inside the main building where her team of 12 specialists waited in the conference room. Maps and computer screens covered the walls, showing the progress of their dig. Status report, Sarah said, taking her seat at the head of the table. Dr. Marcus Webb, the team linguist, spoke first. We reached the main chamber yesterday. The structures inside are definitely artificial. And they're old, Sarah. Really old. How old? Sarah asked. Carbon dating is useless on these materials. but based on the ice layers above them, we're looking at least 5 million years, maybe more. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. 5 million years ago, humans had barely learned to walk upright. Dr. Lisa Park, their materials expert, pulled up photos on the main screen. The objects are made of substances we cannot identify. They look like crystal, but they conduct energy in ways that should be impossible. Some of them are still active. The photos showed a large underground chamber filled with strange artifacts. Tall pillars covered in flowing symbols lined the walls. In the center sat several crystal-like objects that glowed with soft inner light. Active how? Sarah asked. They respond to touch, Dr. Park explained. When I put my hand near one of the data cores, it started pulsing faster. It's like they recognize living beings. Dr. Webb switched to another set of photos. The symbols are the most interesting part. They're not random decorations. They form patterns, and the patterns repeat across different objects. Sarah studied the images. The symbols seemed to shift and flow even in still photographs, making them hard to focus on directly. Have you made any progress translating them? She asked. Some, Dr. Webb said. The symbols represent coordinates, star maps essentially. They show locations throughout our galaxy and several nearby galaxies. But there's something else. He highlighted certain symbols that appeared frequently. This symbol cluster appears on every star map. It translates roughly as the 8th horizon, and it always marks the same region of space. Sarah leaned forward. What region? Empty space beyond the galactic edge. According to our current understanding, there's nothing there. But these maps treat it as the most important location in the galaxy. Dr. Park switched back to her materials data. The technology is incredible. Some of these devices seem to manipulate gravity. Others work with quantum fields we can barely detect. And there's something else down there. She paused, looking nervous. What? Sarah prompted. A ship, partially intact. It's bigger than anything we've ever built, and it's been sitting in perfect condition for millions of years. Sarah stood up quickly. Show me. 20 minutes later, they were in the elevator that descended through 3 kilometers of ice and rock. The underground chamber had been carefully excavated and was now lit by portable work lights. Sarah gasped when she saw it. The space was enormous, carved from solid rock with impossible precision. The walls were covered in the flowing symbols, which seemed to glow faintly in the artificial light. Crystal pillars as tall as trees held up the ceiling, and in the center, taking up nearly half the chamber, sat a ship. It was beautiful and alien at the same time. The hull curved in ways that seemed organic, like it had grown rather than being built. The surface was the same unknown material as the other artifacts, shifting between colors as Sarah watched. Have you been inside? She asked. Dr. Park nodded. The entrance sealed itself after we left, but while we were inside, the ship's systems started coming online. It was like it recognized us. They walked over to the ship. Up close, Sarah could see that the hull was covered in the same flowing symbols. Near what looked like the main entrance, the symbols were glowing brighter. Try touching it, Dr. Webb suggested. Sarah hesitated, then placed her palm against the hull. Immediately, the symbols flared with light. A section of the wall became transparent, revealing an entrance. It only does that for certain people, Dr. Park explained. About half our team can activate it. The other half get no response at all. Sarah stepped inside. The interior was even more amazing than the outside. The walls curved smoothly, with no visible controls or instruments. Instead, the ship seemed to respond to thought and intention. As soon as she entered, Sarah felt something strange. Information began flowing into her mind, not as words or images, but as direct knowledge. She suddenly understood that this ship belonged to a race called the Harbingers. The Harbingers had built a vast civilization spanning multiple galaxies. They had mastered technologies that allowed them to manipulate space, time, and reality itself. But they had faced a terrible enemy, something that consumed not just matter and energy, but the very fabric of existence. In their final war, the Harbingers had scattered seeds throughout the galaxy, not just technology, but genetic markers. They had chosen certain species to carry their legacy forward. Sarah gasped as more information flooded her mind. The genetic markers matched human DNA almost perfectly. Humans were not just another random species. They were the Harbinger's chosen successors. Sarah? Dr. Webb's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you okay? She realized she had been standing motionless for several minutes. The ship's systems had downloaded vast amounts of information directly into her brain. She now knew things about physics and technology that human science had not yet discovered. I'm fine, she said, though her voice shook slightly. But we need to contact the hidden Prometheus project immediately. Dr. Webb looked confused. What's the hidden Prometheus project? Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes bright with new knowledge. It's what this dig was really about. There are people in our government who have been preparing for this discovery for decades. They knew the Harbingers were real. They knew something like this would be found eventually. She walked back to the ship's central chamber, where a large crystal pulsed with soft light. The Harbingers left us more than just one ship, she continued. This is just the first piece. There are hidden installations throughout human space. Technologies waiting to be activated. An entire fleet of ships in quantum suspension, waiting for the right genetic signature to wake them up. Dr. Park stared at her. How do you know all this? The ship told me, Sarah said simply. When I touched the activation panel, it recognized my DNA as Harbinger compatible. It downloaded their entire historical archive into my mind. She looked around at her team, seeing the mix of excitement and fear on their faces. The galaxy thinks humans are primitive and weak, she said. They laugh at us in their councils and deny our requests for territory, but they have no idea what we really are. Sarah placed her hand on the crystal again, and the ship hummed to life around them. Systems that had been dormant for millions of years began activating. The chamber filled with soft light as the ship prepared to return to active status. We're not just another young species trying to find our place in the galaxy, Sarah said, her voice filled with quiet certainty. We're the inheritors of the most advanced civilization that ever existed. She turned to Dr. Webb. Send the coded message to Antarctica Base Command. Tell them we found what we were looking for. As her team scrambled to follow her orders, Sarah remained connected to the ship's systems. Through its sensors, she could feel other Harbinger installations scattered across Earth and the solar system, all waiting to be awakened. The galaxy had made a mistake when they dismissed humanity. Soon they would learn just how big that mistake was. Admiral Marcus Kane floated through the command center of Olympus Station, watching his engineers work through the transparent aluminum windows. The space station looked like a massive flower made of metal and glass, hidden in the asteroid belt, where no one would think to look for it. 6 months had passed since the Antarctic discovery, and everything had changed. What started as a small research project had become humanity's most important secret. The station had grown from a tiny outpost to a full shipyard with thousands of workers who officially did not exist. Kane pushed off from the wall and drifted to the main observation deck. Below him in the station's construction bays, 12 ships took shape. They were unlike anything humans had ever built before, combining sleek Harbinger designs with human engineering principles. Admiral, called Colonel Jessica Martinez, the station's chief engineer. She approached him with a tablet full of reports. The final ship completed its test flight this morning. All systems are working perfectly. Kane took the tablet and scrolled through the data. The ships were incredible. They could travel faster than light without using the jump gates that other species depended on. Their hulls were made of materials that could repair themselves. Their weapons could tear holes in space itself. How's the crew training going? He asked. Better than expected, Martinez replied. The neural interfaces make learning much faster. A pilot can master the ship's systems in weeks instead of years. Kane nodded. The neural interfaces were another gift from the Harbingers. Volunteers could connect their minds directly to the ship's computers, allowing them to control the vessel with thought alone. It was dangerous technology, but it made human pilots far more effective than any alien crew. He thought about the volunteers who had made this possible. Officially, they had all died in training accidents or deep space missions. Their families had been told they were heroes who gave their lives for Earth's future. In a way, that was true. They had given up their old lives to become something new. Any word from our observers in Confluence space? Kane asked. Martinez switched to another screen on her tablet. The reports are coming in daily. The Zephyrians are expanding into the Outer Rim territories, pushing out smaller species. The Vorthans are strip mining entire star systems. The Kelrani are building new military bases near human space. Kane felt anger rise in his chest. While humanity had been working in secret, the galactic powers had become more aggressive. They treated the galaxy like their personal property, taking whatever they wanted and pushing around anyone too weak to stop them. The confluence is getting more corrupt, Martinez continued. Species with advanced technology get better treatment. Those without are ignored or exploited. Earth's status has actually gotten worse since our request was denied. Kane pushed away from the window and headed for the command center. Then it's time to change the rules. The command center was the heart of Olympus Station. Banks of computers monitored Harbinger installations throughout the solar system. 3 more ships had been discovered on Mars, buried under ancient impact craters. Another facility had been found in the asteroid belt, still operational after millions of years. But the most important discovery was Sarah Chen herself. The Antarctic ship had changed her in ways no one fully understood. She could interface with Harbinger technology like she was born to it. More importantly, she could teach others to do the same. Admiral Kane to Dr. Chen, he said into his communicator. I'm here, Sarah's voice responded. She was somewhere deep in the station working with the ship's AI systems. How are the new pilot candidates doing? 12 more passed the compatibility test today, she said. We're up to 200 qualified pilots now. More than enough to crew the fleet. Kane smiled. 200 pilots with neural interfaces could outfight thousands of conventional crews. And these were just the first generation. As more Harbinger technology came online, human capabilities would keep growing. Admiral, called Lieutenant Commander Torres from the communications station, we're receiving intelligence from Agent Wilson in Zephyrian space. Kane walked over to the communications array. Agent Wilson was one of several deep cover operatives humanity had placed throughout Confluence territory. Officially, they were trade representatives or cultural attachés. In reality, they were gathering intelligence and preparing for the day when humanity would reveal its true capabilities. What's Wilson's report? Kane asked. Torres brought up the decoded message on his screen. The Zephyrians are planning a major expansion into the Kepler 442 system, the same system where humanity's research request was denied. Kane's eyes narrowed. When? 3 weeks from now. They're assembling a task force of 40 ships to claim the entire system. Kane studied the star charts on the main display. Kepler 442 was strategically important, sitting at the intersection of several major trade routes. More importantly, the Harbinger archives indicated there were ancient installations in that system. They're moving faster than we expected, he muttered. There's more, Torres continued. The Vorthans are protesting the Zephyrian expansion. They claim they have prior rights to the system. Tensions are rising throughout Confluence space. Kane nodded slowly. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for. The galactic powers were starting to fight among themselves over territory and resources. When species started grabbing for power, conflicts became inevitable. Send a message to all our deep cover agents, he ordered. Tell them to prepare for Phase 2. The waiting period is almost over. Martinez looked up from her tablet. Admiral, are you sure we're ready? The fleet has only been operational for a few weeks. Kane turned to look at the ships taking final shape in the construction bays. Each one represented years of secret work and the sacrifice of thousands of people. They were humanity's answer to centuries of being ignored and dismissed. Colonel, how long did it take the Confluence to decide on humanity's request for research rights? He asked. About 30 seconds, she replied. They didn't even discuss it seriously. And how long did they spend laughing at us afterward? Martinez checked her records. The session lasted another 2 hours. Most of it was spent making jokes about human primitiveness. Kane's smile was cold as the space between stars. Then yes, we're ready. The galaxy has spent decades treating us like children. Time to show them what children can do when they grow up. He activated the station-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every section of Olympus Station, reaching the thousands of workers who had given up their old lives to build humanity's future. Attention all personnel. This is Admiral Kane. For months you have worked in secret preparing for a day that many thought would never come. You have sacrificed your official identities, your families, and your old lives to build something unprecedented. He paused, looking out at the nearly completed fleet. That day has arrived. In 3 weeks, the galaxy will learn that humanity is not the primitive species they believed us to be. They will discover that the children they dismissed have inherited the legacy of the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Throughout the station, workers stopped what they were doing to listen. Prepare the fleet for deployment. Alert. All crews to report for final briefings. Contact our agents throughout Confluence space and tell them the hidden war is about to become visible. Kane closed the communication channel and turned back to Martinez. How long until all ships are ready? For combat, he asked. 6 hours for final systems checks, she replied. 12 hours for full combat readiness. Kane nodded. Make it happen. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you underestimate humanity. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, Kane watched his people rush to their stations. They moved with purpose and precision, ready to change the course of galactic history. Soon the laughter would stop. Soon the galaxy would understand that humanity's time had come. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station at Wolf 359. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park was running the night shift when her instruments detected an impossible energy reading from the Kepler 442 system. "What the hell is that?" she muttered, adjusting her sensors to get a clearer reading. The energy signature was unlike anything in the database. It pulsed with strange rhythms and seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Worse, it was growing, stronger by the hour. Park immediately sent an alert to Confluence headquarters. Within 6 hours, every major species had ships racing toward Kepler 442 to investigate. The Zephyrian task force arrived first, their crystal ships gleaming like jewels against the darkness. High Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the scanner readings with growing alarm. "Report," he ordered. "Sir, there's a massive spatial distortion near the system's outer edge," his science officer replied. "It appears to be some kind of tear in space itself." Veltar moved to the main display. The distortion looked like a wound in reality, with edges that hurt to look at directly. Energy patterns swirled around it in ways that violated the laws of physics. "Any idea what caused it?" he asked. "Unknown, sir, but it's growing, and there's something coming through." As they watched, shapes began emerging from the tear. They were not ships in any conventional sense. They moved like living things, shifting between dimensions as they advanced into normal space. The creatures were massive, easily the size of battleships. Their bodies seemed to be made of dark energy that consumed light itself. Where they passed, space became twisted and wrong. "All ships, battle stations," Veltar ordered. "Prepare to engage unknown hostiles." The Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation. 40 ships arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns, their crystal hulls charging with energy. "Fire!" Veltar commanded. Beams of concentrated light lanced out from the Zephyrian ships, striking the lead creature. The energy weapons passed right through it without effect. "No damage to target," the weapons officer reported. "Our beams aren't affecting them at all." The creatures responded by moving faster. They flowed through space like liquid darkness, reaching the Zephyrian fleet in seconds. When they touched the crystal ships, the vessels simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not damaged. They just ceased to be, leaving behind empty space that hurt to look at. "Retreat!" Veltar shouted. "All ships, emergency jump!" But the creatures moved faster than the ships could escape. In 4 minutes, the entire Zephyrian task force was gone, leaving only empty space and growing tears in reality. News of the disaster spread through Confluence space like wildfire. Emergency sessions convened on Nexus Prime as reports came in from across the galaxy. The creatures, quickly dubbed Devourers by terrified researchers, spread out from Kepler 442 like a plague. They consumed not just matter and energy, but the very fabric of space-time itself. Star systems simply vanished, leaving behind voids that expanded slowly outward. The Vorthan hive fleets tried next. Their insectoid coordination allowed them to attack in perfectly synchronized waves. It made no difference. The Devourers unraveled their ships at the quantum level, turning advanced technology into nothingness. System after system fell. The Kelrani military threw their entire fleet at the creatures near Rigel Centauri. The battle lasted 8 minutes, before the last Kelrani ship disappeared into the growing void. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the same corner of the Great Assembly Hall, where she had been humiliated months earlier. But now the hall was filled with panic instead of laughter. "The defensive line at Alpha Centauri has fallen," reported the Draconian representative, his scaled hands shaking as he read the latest updates. 17 systems have been completely consumed. The Devourers are moving toward the galactic core. Fourth Hand Queen Six Arms gestured frantically. "Our military analysts estimate total galactic extinction within 6 months if we cannot stop them." High Commander Veltar, who had barely escaped the first encounter, looked haggard and defeated. "We have tried everything: energy weapons, kinetic rounds, antimatter charges, quantum disruptors. Nothing affects them. They exist partially outside our reality." Elena listened to the growing panic with a carefully neutral expression. Inside, she was calculating timing and probabilities. The Hidden Prometheus project had predicted this day would come, though not exactly like this. The Etherian representative floated over to her again, its energy form flickering with desperation. "Your species spoke of research in Kepler 442. It whispered. Did you know this would happen? Did you see signs of these creatures?" Elena met its gaze calmly. Humanity had no advanced knowledge of this threat. She said truthfully, "The Harbinger archives had warned of something called Devourers, but they had never specified when or where they would return." "But you have been studying ancient texts," the Etherian pressed. "Your archaeological teams have made discoveries in Antarctica and Mars. Perhaps there are records that could help us?" Elena nodded slowly. "We have found some ancient artifacts, but nothing that would help against creatures like these." That was technically true. The artifacts themselves would not help. But the knowledge they contained and the technology they had unlocked was a different matter entirely. The session dragged on for hours as species after species reported the same thing. Their most advanced weapons were useless. Their fastest ships could not escape. Their strongest shields offered no protection. Finally, as the situation grew more desperate, the confluence took an unprecedented step. High Commander Veltar stood at the central podium, his crystal features reflecting the emergency lighting. "The galactic confluence faces extinction," he announced. "All previous territorial disputes and political differences are suspended. We formally request aid from every available resource." He paused, his voice becoming strained. "This includes species previously excluded from Confluence membership due to technological limitations." Every eye in the hall turned to Elena. She felt the weight of 47 species' attention, many of them the same beings who had laughed at humanity's request just months ago. "The Confederation formally requests any assistance Earth can provide," Veltar continued. "Any knowledge, any technology, any insight that might help us survive this crisis." Elena stood slowly, feeling the moment she had been preparing for finally arrive. "Humanity appreciates the Confluence's request," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We will provide what assistance we can." The Vorthan Queen leaned forward. "What exactly can your species offer? Your technology is centuries behind our own." Elena's smile was small but confident. "Our technology may be limited, but we have made some interesting archaeological discoveries recently. Ancient records that mention creatures similar to these Devourers." The hall buzzed with sudden interest. Any information was better than nothing. "The records are incomplete," Elena continued, "but they suggest these creatures can be fought. The ancients had ways of dealing with them." "What methods?" demanded the Kelrani representative. "Weapons that operate outside normal physics," Elena replied carefully. technologies that manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. The High Commander's crystal eyes flared brighter. Do you have access to such weapons? Elena paused as if considering how much to reveal. We have found some artifacts that might be relevant, but using them would require significant resources and coordination. Anything, the Draconian representative pleaded. We will provide whatever support you need. Elena nodded gravely. Very well. Earth will do everything in our power to help, but you should know that our response will be different from what you might expect. She activated her communication device. This is Ambassador Vasquez to Earth. Command. Authorization code Prometheus 77 Alpha. Initiate emergency protocols. The galaxy requires our assistance. As she closed the connection, Elena looked around the hall at the desperate faces watching her. They had no idea what they had just asked for. In a few days they would learn that the primitive species they had dismissed was about to save their civilization. But the galaxy that emerged from this crisis would be very different from the one that had laughed at human ambitions. The time for hiding was over. Humanity was about to show the galaxy who they really were. The battle for Rigel Centauri began at dawn, ship time. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the last desperate defense of galactic civilization took shape around the system's bright blue star. Thousands of ships from dozens of species formed defensive lines in space. Zephyrian crystal vessels glowed like jewels. Vorthon hive ships moved in perfect coordination. Kelrani fighters swarmed like angry birds around massive Draconian battleships. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, and it would not be enough. The Devourers came through tears in space itself, emerging from voids that hurt to look at. They moved like living darkness, consuming light and matter and the very fabric of reality. Where they passed, stars simply stopped existing. Kane watched the enemy approach through his ship's sensors. The Harbinger archives had prepared him for this moment, but seeing the Devourers in person was still terrifying. They were creatures that existed partially outside normal physics, making them nearly impossible to fight with conventional weapons. Sir, called Commander Torres from the communications station. The Confluence fleet is requesting our position. They want to know when we'll arrive to support them. Kane smiled grimly. Tell them we're already here. Torres looked confused. Sir, our ships are still cloaked. They can't see us. Exactly, Kane replied. Signal the fleet, decloak all vessels. Let's introduce ourselves properly. Throughout the Rigel Centauri system, space itself seemed to shift and bend. 12 shapes materialized from nowhere, their appearance causing sensor arrays throughout the Confluence fleet to overload and shut down. The human ships were unlike anything in galactic records. They moved with impossible grace, their hulls gleaming with energy patterns that pulsed like heartbeats. Each vessel was a perfect blend of ancient Harbinger design and human engineering, built for war against enemies that existed beyond normal reality. Kane's flagship, named Harbinger's Wake, positioned itself between the Devourers and the largest concentration of Confluence ships. The other human vessels spread out in a formation that spoke of absolute confidence. This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Terra Defense Force, Kane announced, his voice broadcasting on all frequencies. Commanding the 8th Horizon Fleet. Confluence vessels withdraw to safe distance. We'll handle this. High Commander Veltar's response crackled over the communications array. Impossible. Humans don't possess ships capable of faster than light travel, let alone... His words cut off as the human fleet opened fire. The weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Quantum disruptors tore through the Devourers' multi-dimensional forms, forcing them back into normal space where they could be damaged. Gravity cannons collapsed sections of space-time, trapping the creatures in temporal loops. Reality anchors prevented them from phasing out of normal physics. But the most devastating weapons were the Harbinger inheritance devices. These modified the laws of physics in localized areas, creating zones where the Devourers' advantages simply did not work. Cut off from their dimensional refuges, the creatures became vulnerable to conventional attack. The lead Devourer, a massive entity the size of a small moon, tried to phase through the human defensive line. It met a wall of modified spacetime and was forced back into normal reality. Immediately, 6 human ships opened fire with weapons that unmade matter at the quantum level. The creature writhed in what might have been pain, its dark energy form, flickering between dimensions. But the human weapons followed it everywhere, striking it regardless of which layer of reality it tried to hide in. Kane watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The Harbinger archives had been clear about Devourer tactics. They relied on their ability to exist outside normal physics, making them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. But the Harbingers had developed specific countermeasures during their own war against these creatures. "Target the dimensional anchor points," Kane ordered. "Don't let them retreat to the void spaces." The human fleet moved with precision that seemed impossible for such large vessels. They turned at angles that should have torn them apart, accelerated to velocities that violated known physics, and coordinated their attacks with perfect timing. Within minutes, the first Devourer fell. Its death scream echoed across multiple dimensions, causing every ship in the system to register strange energy readings. The creature's form collapsed in on itself, leaving behind a small tear in space that quickly sealed itself. The other Devourers responded by trying to overwhelm the human ships with sheer numbers. Dozens of the creatures swarmed toward Harbinger's wake, their dark forms blotting out the stars. Kane calmly activated his ship's most powerful weapon, the 8th Horizon Cannon, drew energy from the spaces between realities, focusing it into a beam that existed in all dimensions simultaneously. When it fired, a line of absolute destruction cut through the swarm of Devourers, eliminating half of them instantly. The battle that military analysts had predicted would last days was over in 18 minutes. As the last Devourer fell, its form dissolving into scattered energy, the human fleet regrouped in perfect formation. Around them, thousands of confluent ships floated in stunned silence. Kane activated the fleet-wide communication system. His image appeared on screens throughout the system, no longer the representative of a primitive species, but the commander, who had just saved galactic civilization. "Representatives of the confluence," Kane's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You asked where humanity learned to fight creatures that exist outside normal reality. The answer is simple. We learned from their creators." Throughout the Confluence fleet, crew members stared at their screens in shock. The implications of Kane's words were staggering. 75,000 years ago, Kane continued, the Harbingers built the greatest civilization this galaxy has ever known. They created the jump gates you still use. They established the fundamental technologies your societies depend on. And when they faced extinction at the hands of the Devourers, they prepared for this day. Ambassador Elena Vasquez appeared on screen beside Kane, her diplomatic composure replaced by something far more formidable. "The Harbingers scattered their legacy throughout the galaxy," she explained. "Not just technology, but genetic markers. They chose specific worlds, specific species to carry their knowledge forward. Earth was not selected at random." The Etherian representative's energy form flickered with what might have been recognition. "The 8th Horizon," it whispered across the communication channels. "The hidden edge of reality where possibility becomes actuality." Kane nodded. "For generations you treated humanity as children playing at civilization. You laughed at our requests and dismissed our capabilities, but you were looking at only the surface." He gestured to the human fleet, their ships glowing with power that seemed to bend space around them. "We are not just another species struggling for recognition. We are the inheritors of the Harbinger's legacy. Their knowledge flows through our scientists. Their technology powers our ships. Their purpose guides our actions." High Commander Veltar found his voice first. "The artifacts we've found throughout the galaxy, the ancient ruins, the mysterious technologies, all Harbinger constructs," Elena confirmed. "All part of a plan that spanned 75 millennia. They knew the Devourers would return eventually. They prepared weapons, knowledge, and guardians to face them when that day came." Kane's smile was cold as the space between stars. "You were right about one thing. We are children compared to the great galactic civilizations. Children of the most advanced species this galaxy has ever known." He looked out at the thousands of ships surrounding his fleet, their crews struggling to understand the new reality they faced. "The age of confluence dominance is over," Kane announced. "Humanity has inherited responsibility for this galaxy's protection. The Devourers were just the first test. There are other threats out there, other challenges that will require Harbinger technology to overcome." The communication channels filled with panicked chatter as the implications sank in. The primitive species they had excluded and dismissed now held power beyond imagination. "The galaxy's rules are about to change," Kane continued. "Species that have spent centuries exploiting the weak and grabbing territory will find that approach no longer works. Humanity will ensure that justice and cooperation replace greed and aggression." Elena stepped forward. "The confluence has a choice. Accept humanity's leadership and work together to build a better galaxy, or stand aside while we do it without you." As the human fleet began forming up for the journey back to confluence space, representatives from 47 species had to face a new reality. The laughter had stopped. The mockery was over. The species they had dismissed as primitive children had revealed themselves as the inheritors of galactic civilization itself. And now, with the power of the Eighth Horizon flowing through their technology and the weapons of gods at their command, humanity was ready to reshape the galaxy according to their vision. The age of human ascendancy had begun, and the universe would never be the same.